Hey, it's Jordan. I'm delighted to be joined by Veronica. You reached out to me, and to tell you the truth, I knew nothing about what uh, what you were talking about. And when I looked into it, I was just disgusted, actually. So I'm glad you reached out and we're able to talk about this. So I'm gonna give it over to you to just start with your experience because a lot of people might not realize that for early teens, teenagers, a lot of teenagers with behavioral issues or things like that are sent to certain reform centers or schools that are not reforming but abusing. So, can you share your experience?
Yeah, so when I was 15 years old, first of all, I grew up in Berkeley, California. And when I was 15 years old, uh, I I had a very tumultuous home life. I wasn't the best kid, but um, my dad basically ended up becoming informed of this wilderness boot camp in the Utah desert by the Berkeley Police Department, actually. So a municipal service paid for with tax dollars, informing parents about these private facilities. There's no government regulation, there's no oversight, but they actually get grants from the US government. They get billions of dollars of grants from the government, the industry in general as a whole. But my dad was informed of this program called Outback Wilderness Expeditions. They rebranded to Outback Behavioral Health, I believe. A lot of these programs rebrand. But anyway, so my dad was informed of it, and then about 2 weeks later, I was sent. Um, my dad actually had me transported by a hired transporter, which is pretty much a hired kidnapper, from a Walmart parking lot, actually next to the Oakland airport. He met up with the guy in the parking lot and then allowed the guy to literally kidnap me into his freaking, I think it was like an Escalade or a Tahoe or something. But he literally he was hired by my parent to kidnap me in a Walmart parking lot. And then the guy took me. I don't remember exactly where he took me at first, but it was so casual for him. Like apparently this was like he'd done this before clearly. Um, but I ended up having to stay in some Marriott hotel overnight with him and some stranger named Miranda. And then in the morning, he drove Miranda and I to the Oakland airport. Miranda flew with me on an airplane to Salt Lake City airport. And then from there, Miranda handed me over to two other hired kidnappers who I don't remember their names, but it was some guy and a lady. And they drove me to some field house where they strip searched me without a parent guardian present. And this is once again, these aren't government employees or anything like of the sort. This is a private company, privately regulated, no oversight, and they're strip searching minors without parents or guardians present. And then they made me put on a bunch of boot camp clothes like baggy cargo pants and thermals and Fruit of the Loom shirts and stuff.
And
And then
what's the name of the company?
uh, the company I was sent to, it's called Outback Behavioral Health.
Okay.
They have social media and everything. It's like a big propaganda page. All their social media profiles. It's crazy. But so then these people, then they drove me out into the middle of the high Utah desert. The only thing near where in proximity to where I was this military base in the middle of the Utah desert called Dugway Proving Ground. It's actually a military base where biological chemical weapons are manufactured and tested for the US government. And they're notorious for not properly containing the testing that they do. It's leached out into the surrounding area. They've caused a mass livestock die off in the past. They're all, anyway, that's beside the point. That's a whole other layer to this. But so I got dropped off there in the middle of the night. I arrived there on November 11th, 2011. Um, I was supposed to be there longer than I ended up being there for, and that was supposed to be the first step in me going into this industry like everybody else. My dad ended up pulling me out after 7 weeks and 3 days. I counted every day. Um, after 7 weeks and 3 days, he pulled me out because he didn't want to pay anymore, because it's so ridiculously overpriced. My dad paid like almost $40,000 for me to get sent there. They didn't even give us backpack frames. They made us make our backpacks out of the fork of a juniper tree and strips of leather and like pieces of styrofoam that I had to sew together with sinew and like a needle in the middle of the desert. And
And what when you were dropped off, where did your parents tell you you were going, and for what purpose?
so my dad wouldn't tell me anything at first. And then the hired transporter kidnapper guy that picked me up from Walmart told me I was going to boarding school. So then for the whole time until I ended up getting dropped off in the desert, I thought I was being taken to boarding school. And then after I get to the desert, then I'm told that the boot camp is like the prerequisite to the boarding school. Like you need to go through the boot camp first, basically to be broken like a horse before you're put into one of the boarding schools. There's also residential treatment centers or facilities, which is like a more like an inpatient ward version of a indoor setting compared to a boarding school. But once again, it's not actually, government regulated like an actual psychiatric inpatient ward would be or something. And so, yeah, I was there 7 weeks and 3 days through the winter. I was sleeping in the snow in a tarp in sub-freezing temperatures. The only access to heat, to fire that we had was through bow drilling. So we all had to learn how to bow drill, and we had to make our own bow drilling kits and scavenge for the rocks, for our top rocks for the kit. It's a
Can you
specific type of.
explain what bow drilling is? Because I have never heard of that.
So it's a natural way of starting fire.
Okay.
Aside from flint, pretty much you need a fireboard, a bow, spindles, and a top rock. And so the fireboard you get from a sage bush. You hatchet the root of a sage bush off and split it in half, and then you take a knife and you notch a hole into the board. And then spindles are thin, straight pieces of sage branch. You have to find like the straightest branch you can find, and you shave all the bark off of it, and then you shave both ends down to a point like a pencil. And then the top rock is a piece of soapstone, and you grind a hole into the top rock so that you can notch one end of the pointed spindle into the top rock. You notch the other side of the spindle into the notch in the fireboard that you made. And then you wrap the spindle around a piece of cordage that you have tied off to a bow. The bow you make from cutting down a branch of a juniper tree where one end is stump and then the other end is forked out. And you cut off the branches at the fork, but leave the fork, and then you notch about like half an inch into the stump part so that you can tie a loop knot in a piece of cordage, put the loop through the horn part of the fork, pull it over to the stump end, and then pull the cord through the slit so that it's taut. And then
And
yeah,
so this doesn't sound like a quick process, and you're
it's not.
doing this in the freezing cold.
Yeah.
And how many other teenagers, I assume females, were out there?
So from any given time, there were anywhere between about, I'd say like 7 to, I think the most was 13 people. So.
And was it all women?
So all the kids in the camp that I was with were all girls. Some of the staff were men. Um, they kept all of the boys and the girls separate. I only saw guys when I was being taken out of Utah, when I was in the field house waiting for my dad to come get me.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only time I interacted with these two dudes for maybe like 15 minutes, and then my therapist got mad at me and told me to cover myself up.
So what exactly, if the goal or the marketing of these centers is to improve behavioral issues, to whatever rectify, teenagers acting out of line? Was there anything other than like forced labor, like therapy sessions, counseling,
So
anything mental health related? Because it sounds basically like what you said. They try and break you, like almost like a military boot camp.
yeah. Well, so there's different styles of boot camps. The one that I was sent to, it's technically considered therapy style boot camp. Because there are more extreme versions of actual military style where they like, if you don't pack your backpack fast enough, then they make you take apart all your things and throw it down a hill and go get it and redo it. And so there are programs like that. The one that I was sent to, we did have a therapist. The therapist I had, her name was Tracy. I honestly, so I feel kind of, I feel very manipulated by the entire program, especially by Tracy. The more that the older I get and the more I look back on it, I feel very betrayed by the therapists that they had there, because it was my first interaction, my first introduction to mental health services, to any type of therapy in general. So to this day, I'm very standoffish towards it because of the experience I had with the therapy that I got there. They have this attack style therapy that they implement around the fire pit there, where they pretty much have you air out your issues publicly in front of all the girls, and then everybody like chips in their 2 cents and and like dog piles on you about everybody's respective issues. And then they do have independent sessions with each person, but my therapist, I know for a fact she was like suppressing the letters my mom was sending to me. She wouldn't give me the letters my mom was sending. I have no idea whether or not the letters I wrote to my parents were ever relayed to them. um so I don't know, looking back, I don't know how many of the sessions I had with her were in any way truthful and how much of it was just like all manipulation. Um, but that's the style of therapy that they have there, is like attack
Well,
style and like, suppressing your ability to like communicate with your parents.
it's also, I mean, unless you're willingly going into group therapy, you're supposed to have like one-on-one patient doctor confidentiality.
Yeah.
So your whatever issues or conceived issues are being floated around for the other teenagers to hear and see.
Yeah, pretty much.
And can you talk about, because this is also a sinister part of this, the money trail here, which includes Mitt Romney's Bain Capital, because, a lot of Democrats think Mitt Romney is now one of the reasonable Republicans. But Bain Capital has made a lot of money off of these kind of camps.
Yeah, that I actually didn't even know about the private equity side of everything until very recently is when I started looking into. But I always figured there was like an underlying layer, behind the scenes, like who's actually, paying for all of this, who's paying for the operations of this industry. And it turns out Mitt Romney, senator of Utah, he's the founder of Bain Capital. So Bain Capital is a private equity firm that owns CRC Health Group, and CRC Health Group is a health conglomerate, and they own Aspen Education Group, which owns all these different wilderness boot camps, residential treatment centers, and boarding schools all across the United States. They're one of many different groups, though. Aspen is just one of them, but it's one of the largest. I know multiple people just offhand that have been sent to Aspen affiliated centers, not just the people that were in my camp, but just you know meeting people. I've met so many different people that have been touched by that horrible industry. And it goes further than just Mitt Romney, though. Like I know that, sorry, I need to pull the reference up. I don't have everything memorized off the top of my head.
No
But
problem.
so I know that sorry. So Mitt Romney, he is one of many politicians within Congress that are tied to Bain Capital. Bain Capital, if you go on, just Open Secrets, you can see just from publicly available information that they get money from all sides of Congress. It's bipartisan. It's not just the GOP. The GOP is just the main benefactors of this industry, and it can also be traced back to the Reagan administration. Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign was all tied into this industry and made it into the profit behemoth that it is today. I know that Mike Pence is also tied into it. Sorry, I really need to have this memorized. It's hard to memorize all of it. Apologies.
We could edit some of that. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah, so in this Salon article, it was written in 2012. So this was written like a decade ago. Actually, it came out just a few months after I got out of Outback. And in it, it says that CRC's corporate culture, in turn, reflects the attitudes and financial imperatives of Bain Capital, the private equity firm founded by Mitt Romney. The Romney campaign did not reply to written questions. Bain is known for its relentless obsession with maximizing shareholder value and revenues. Indeed, it has become a talking point as of late on the Romney campaign trail. So this is back when Romney was running for president. So actually, on the campaign trail, his wife, Mitt Romney's wife, when she was questioned about what type of work she would do as first lady, she said that she was going to build off of Nancy Reagan's model. She was directly referencing that she intended to build up the troubled teen industry, the congregate care industry, if Mitt Romney were to have been elected in 2012. That would have been one of his main focuses, was building this industry up even more. So, not that I'm like a huge fan of Obama, but that's what would have happened.
But also, obviously you can't speak for others, but you mentioned you obviously have spoken with other, I would say, survivors of this. And if the point was to correct behavioral issues, mental health issues, to me, sounds like these kind of camps or boarding schools that have similar things going on actually are creating trauma rather than correcting behavior. Can you kind of talk about, as much as you want to share? I assume it left some scars for you. You're a young woman, but talk about how you've dealt with the aftermath of this and other women you've spoken with.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, like I mentioned before, having been sent into the industry, it's left me with this really, I don't have any trust for mental health care. I don't feel comfortable even seeking out a therapist because I don't trust their intentions. And it's very personal for me because my mom was also sent to a therapeutic boarding school when she was a teenager, and so it's like a generational thing almost. But what bothers me even more is the trauma that I live with just from those 2 months that I was there. I was only there for 2 months, but the other people that were in my camp, they were in the industry for years, and they had no way to get out, and they were just labeled as obstinate. And who would ever believe the delinquent teen? So it's like their voice doesn't matter, their perspective doesn't matter, their viewpoint doesn't matter, because they're just lying. They must just be lying. And I spent years, when I got out of Outback, I got thrown back into high school, and just trying to bring it up among my peers, people looked at me like I was crazy. It's like something out of a movie or something, and Hollywood sensationalizes it with movies like Holes, which are, half true. except I wasn't digging for treasure, and I wasn't even given a shovel when I did have to dig holes. but but I just feel very disconnected from from everybody else my age. It's really hard to make connections, to form connections. Um, yeah, it's really difficult to just acclimate into regular society and to put this all in the back of your mind. To just carry on, and knowing that there are kids out there right now, somewhere in the Utah desert next to Dugway, in the same camp I was sent to. It's like this eerie feeling. It just eats at me. It bothers me that no one even knows, it's going on. It's like some urban legend or just something for Hollywood to make movies about every couple of years.
And to the best of your knowledge, because I've read up on this, and there are groups that have spoken out against this and demanded Congress act. As far as I can tell, Congress has not acted on any of it, probably because a lot of them are making some dough off of this. Can you kind of talk about what has been the response from government officials, state level, local? Have anybody called for reform of this or regulation of these camps, or has it been a lot of lip service?
Yeah, so actually, so in October, there were a lot of high-ranking members of Congress that spoke on Capitol Hill. Ro Khanna, he introduced legislation called the Accountability for Congregate Care Act. I'm not the biggest fan of Ro Khanna as a leftist. You know, I have qualms with the way that he's very obsequious towards the Biden administration. The bill, it was introduced, but it hasn't officially been introduced, apparently. I followed up with Caroline Cole regarding the Accountability for Congregate Care Act. Caroline Cole, she used to be the Director of Government Relations for Breaking Code Silence, but now she is one of the founding members of Unsilence, which is a new nonprofit. Breaking Code Silence and Unsilence started with they started with the same objective. Unsilence pretty much is members of Breaking Code Silence that branched off with their own organization. But Caroline Cole was one of the main members of Breaking Code Silence that had worked with congressional staffers to write the Accountability for Congregate Care Act. And that legislation, it's supposed to impose a Bill of Rights for children that are sent into the industry, into the congregate care industry. It's supposed to, enact protections and official government oversight and reforms of the industry. But like I said, it hasn't, like you said, it hasn't actually been introduced yet. A lot of people I'm in a lot of support groups on social media, survivors of the industry, and people are getting more and more restless, asking, what's going on, what's the status, what's happening, are all these people actually going to follow through? Were they just, like you say, was it just lip service? What's actually going on? And there actually are a lot of celebrities that have been sent into this industry as well. And Paris Hilton, surprisingly, has used her celebrity status and her platform to advocate for reform of this industry. She was sent to a place called Provo Canyon School when she was a teenager. She actually made a whole documentary. It's free on YouTube. And she talks about her experience being sent there in the documentary. And, once again, like, I know that she's done some really questionable things, made really questionable statements I definitely don't really align with at all. But I appreciate her advocacy work. I appreciate her using her platform to bring more attention to the industry. She actually spoke in front of, I think it was the Utah State Senate, to advocate for reform on the state level in Utah. And she was one of the main driving factors in, what's his name? I have it saved. Governor of Utah. Yeah, Governor Spencer Cox. I believe that's his name. Yeah. Yeah. So he signed Senate Bill 127 into law on March last year. And that creates new limits on the use of restraints, drugs, and isolation rooms in youth treatment programs in the state of Utah.
Right.
But Paris Hilton is directly partly responsible for that being signed into law, though. So,
Mhm.
and she spoke on Capitol Hill as well, along with Rokana. And she's been on social media lately. There's also been like individual pushes to close certain schools and certain individual places that have rampant reports of abuse, rampant allegations of abuse. I know that one of them is Agape Boarding School. There's a huge effort among survivors of the troubled teen industry to close Agape, and Paris Hilton has actually shared out messages on her Twitter boosting that call to close down Agape. And she's called on the governor of, I think it was Montana, is where Agape is, to take action. So I really appreciate the efforts that she's made with her platform.
Right. And, to me, all of what you're describing, of course, there's financial scumbags making money off of this, but it also goes to the mental health crisis in our country, because I think there are more and more limited resources for people, and the resource and what's available out there oftentimes costs $200 to $300 an hour for therapy. So a lot of parents, you know, maybe with they think good intentions, are sending their children into kind of this traumatic sacrifice zone, uh, because they're not aware of other options. Or, I mean, I'm not defending the parents who do this, but I'm sure not every one of them knows truly what's going on. So it really is emblematic of a mental health crisis, because, the answer for whatever unruly teenagers' behavioral problems is not traumatizing them.
And I know that in some cases, like with my situation, the Berkeley Police Department was the body that informed my dad about Outback. So why is a taxpayer-funded service advocating for these private places that don't have oversight? That speaks to a failure on an institutional level of our government, and the failure of our mental health services, that, there's so few government programs, government entities, government options, that even our taxpayer funded services are advocating for these unregulated places that are rampant with abuse.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. Well, all I could say is, I haven't dealt with your trauma, but in my life, particularly in college, I had a really bad episode with depression. I was suicidal, and a therapist basically saved my life. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a long road for you to trust that kind of help. But, I hope things get better for you. And I'm glad you're in support groups, so you're not alone. And I'm going to follow up on this. I'm going to follow up with Rokana too,
Thank you.
to find out
And
where things stand.
my apologies from if I rambled at all, if I wasn't
No,
concise enough with my words. It's
not at
really
all.
nerve wracking. I follow you a lot on social media. This is crazy.
Well, thank you. And
Talking
by the
to you.
way, to the audience, she just reached out to me. We have a tip line. It's on my Twitter profile, the number, so you could send via Signal a story idea or a personal story like this, and I'll try my best to cover as many as I can. But thank you, Veronica. Really courageous to tell this story, and yeah, I'm going to follow up and keep in touch.
Oh, and I just wanted to say there is also going to be a drive in there's a countdown online, unsilenced, on their Twitter and also on their Facebook and also on their website. They have like a countdown clock of they're going to be holding a rally on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. to try to bring more attention to the Accountability for Congregate Care Act, sort of like a call to Congress to take action, to follow up, and there's going to be people speaking, the families of people that have actually died in these facilities. Families of those people are going to be speaking there. Other survivors are going to be speaking. So yeah.
Great. I'll look into that too. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I really, really appreciate you, helping to amplify the issue, to bring more attention to it, and to the bill as well. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.